you all for being here. As she said, my name is Ms. Scarboro, and I'm the Emanuel County Outreach Advocate for the Refuge. We do have a shelter in Vidalia, but my office is located here in Swainsboro. So I'm going to get started by telling you a little bit about who we are and what we do. The Refuge is a nonprofit, non-denominational, United Way agency that provides safe emergency shelter and other services to women and children who are in physical danger from domestic violence or sexual assault. We are funded through the CJCC, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and we serve 5 counties, Toombs, Montgomery, Wheeler, Truitland, and Emanuel. All of our services are free and they are confidential. We are 24/7 hotline and emergency shelter. Our doors are always open and our phone lines are always available. We specialize in victim advocacy, legal advocacy, child advocacy, and sexual assault advocacy, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a moment. We have trained staff at our shelter, as I said, 24/7. Transportation is provided, their meals, their clothing, school supplies, hygiene products, anything that you need to survive on a day-to-day, we have available. Because a lot of times these victims, when they leave their home, they leave kind of in a hurry. So if they come with just the clothes on their back, that is absolutely fine. And we do keep that location confidential for safety reasons. About 2 years ago, it was almost exactly 2 years ago, in February of 2014, they hired me for the Emanuel County Outreach Office. And the same services that we offer at the Vidalia shelter are offered here as well, except that we do not have a shelter in Emanuel County. The shelter is actually over in Vidalia. But if shelter is needed, I'm able to provide transportation or arrange transportation for the family if it's needed. I do keep my office location confidential as well. It's kind of on an as-to-need-to-know basis, and that's also for security purposes. I really don't want abusers knowing that they can come looking for somebody at my office because I don't want that responsibility. One big thing that we really utilize here in Emanuel County, because I'm only one person for an entire county, we do call on volunteers a lot. We have support groups. Right now we're doing them twice a month, and I do need group facilitators for that for both ladies and children. I do a lot of legal advocacy. I'm in court quite a bit, twice this week already. So I do sometimes need court assistance, someone that I can train to kind of shadow me in court when I have 2 or more clients that I'm trying to serve. And we do take in donations, and sometimes those donations can be quite large. And so I usually like to call on my volunteers to come help me process those donations. We have to log in everything that comes in and everything that goes out. So if anybody is interested, or you know somebody who may be, please see me afterwards, and I will talk to you about how to get started with that. So what is domestic violence, and who does it affect? Well, domestic violence is all about power and control. About 85% of the victims are women, but men can also be victims as well. Now, our shelter does not house male victims over the age of 18, but there are other shelters in Georgia that do, that we can coordinate with if that is needed. And we are still able to offer other services to male victims outside of being in our shelter. About 1 in every 4 women will experience domestic violence at some point in her life. A lot of people, I think, really have in their mind that domestic violence only affects maybe low-income families, but it really affects all ages, all socioeconomic levels. It has no prejudice, so religion is nothing for domestic violence. And it's not always physical. It can be emotional, verbal, and financial abuse is actually a large part too, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So like I was saying, it's the power and control. And on your handouts, there is a copy of this power and control wheel because it's a little bit hard to see on here. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but some of the main tactics that abusers like to use with in their power is they really like to use coercion and threats. That this is their favorite thing, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the using children. There are a lot of threats. I will kill you if you leave me. This marriage is for better or worse, and till death do us part. And they will really stress that, death do us part. They threaten to take the children away. They may threaten or actually injure or kill pets in the process because they know that pets are usually near and dear to the victim. They will destroy personal property. I had a situation one day, I was transporting a lady to the shelter and I kept smelling gasoline. And I said, why do I smell gas? And I was kind of getting a little concerned that maybe something was wrong with my car. She said, oh, that's my clothes. He doused them with gas. He was going to set them on fire. So she managed to get her clothes just before he lit them on fire. So that's actually not the first time I heard that story. It was the first time that I, actually had the clothes in my vehicle that, had the smell. The children are really a big factor in this too. They really like to use children against the mothers. But you guys can look at that and read it. Part of the power and control is it's a big cycle. People say, well, how did you get involved with a person like this? Well, they don't start off being, abusive. They usually start off being very sweet, very kind, very loving. They bring her in, and these men are just really too good to be true. And we say men, it can be women as well, but we see more women victims, so y'all overlook the men thing. I'm not picking on y'all. But they're usually very kind. They hold the door, they wash the dishes, but they don't stay that way forever. Eventually that tension builds and arguments start. He's, really feeling frustration, and he tends to turn it towards her. They may start to argue, he may start to call names, and then at that point, a lot of times, if he hasn't already began to get physical with her, it will go back into the honeymoon stage. I'm sorry, baby, I love you. I'm never going to do this again. I love you. I'm sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. And then we cycle back through it again. And each time this cycle, it gets worse and worse to the point that, it does become physical, and it can become lethal. I mean, we have had victims to lose their life in these situations. We know that it's absolutely impossible to know what goes on behind closed doors. A lot of times they put on a very good facade, to hide what's going on inside the home. But if you suspect that someone may be in a domestic violence situation, there are signs that you can look for. Victims are very often very afraid of their partner. They're anxious. They are eager to please. So if they're out with friends, they may get harassing phone calls and texts. Where are you? Who are you with? Why aren't you home? And you can see in that they're very nervous, and they're usually very eager to get back home to keep from having an incident escalate. Physical abuse is pretty often the easiest to spot because there's bruises, there's marks. There may be red marks on her ears or her face where maybe he's choked her and cut her airways off. It doesn't have to just be bruising. There are other things you can look for. Redness in the eyes is a good indication that somebody has been strangled. And by the way, I just want to add, that's not in here, the strangulation is actually a fairly new law in Georgia, and it is a felony. And I'm working very hard with our DA's office now to try to push that in the court system, because that's a very common thing, is that they grab them by the throat. And if they so much it doesn't even have to be hand marks, it can be a scratch. Anything on her neck or face to show that he grabbed her around the neck, it is a felony and it is seriously punishable. So those things are easy to spot. The one that I believe is the hardest is the isolation. You may notice that maybe your family or friend is no longer calling you on the phone. They're not going out in public as often, or when they do go out in public, he's glued to her side. They don't let him get out. I had a situation where a lady and her baby, less than a year old, were locked in the house all day. They were locked in from the outside. He took her cell phone. He took the vehicle. She had no way out. None. She had no means to go get diapers for her baby or food or anything. She was completely dependent upon him. Emotional, look for signs in people maybe that were once outgoing or no longer. Maybe they're more withdrawn. They may seem depressed or have anxiety. Personality changes, again, if somebody, because I'm a pretty outgoing person, so if all of a sudden I'm kind of withdrawing and I'm not talking to family and friends, there's a pretty good indication that there's something going on that maybe they need to talk to me about. Like I said, it's extremely difficult to know what goes on behind closed doors. So I'm going to bring it here to the screen. This is a lady. Her name is Susan Still. Her abuser was so narcissistic that he thought that what he was doing in his abuse to her was justified. And so he had his 13-year-old son take a video camera and record the abuse towards the mother. Now, I will warn you, this is a little bit graphic, but it is condensed down. There's a much longer, more detailed version on YouTube. If you feel like you can handle watching it, you can Google it later. But this one is a little bit more condensed down, but it is still fairly graphic. Can y'all hear that?
Video you're about to see on orders from his father.
You play those stupid games with me, I'll knock your teeth out of your face. You hear me?
It's the nightmare we hear happens behind closed doors, but rarely, if ever, seen.
Keep playing this game, I'll knock your head off that wall.
In a rage, Susan Still's husband, emotionally and verbally, attacks her in front of their children. With her oldest son, 13, on the other side of the lens, and her 8-year-old son also in the room, Susan's husband calls her stupid 23 times, heifer 28 times, among other dehumanizing names.
That's what you are. So
I don't need to be stupid. I don't need to act stupid. I don't want to act stupid. I don't, and I'm sorry.
The abuse then turns from words and threats to fists and an explosion of violence.
It's still hard for me to watch after all this time. And I cannot watch that video without thinking what's going to happen to those two boys. I just wonder if there's enough therapy in the world for those two boys. When you not only have witnessed that happen to your mother on a almost daily basis and sometimes several times a day, but you were the person who filmed it, who was forced to partake in it. So that's what I was thinking then, and that's what I continue to think now. I just, for every woman who's ever thought that I'm staying because I want to make it okay for my children, the damage to your children, emotionally and spiritually, even though your children may never get hit, the damage to them doesn't even begin to compare to whatever your emotional or physical damage is. Because you just can't undo it. It cannot be undone.
That video went on for 51 minutes of him just terrorizing her and both of her children there to witness. So how does violence affect children? Children often act out what they see in the home. They may become depressed. They are often afraid of adults. They may start to have problems in school. They're tired. A lot of times they're they're kept awake all night. They hear the fighting going on whether parents realize it or not. They're unable to concentrate. Their grades start to drop. They develop health problems, particularly stomach problems and lack of appetite. Even older children may have bedwetting problems. And social problems is really almost a given. They may isolate themselves. They may become aggressive. They have difficulty making friends and relating to others, and they fight and act out what they see in the home. And we see this a lot at the shelter. I'm not at the shelter very often, but when I am, you can really see these children and how it affects them. They fight, they hit, they kick, they cry, they scream. They have, some social and developmental issues a lot of the time. So like I said, they act it out because it's a learned behavior. They're doing what they see mom and dad do. These children are more likely than non-abused children to be involved in violent criminal activity as they get older. They're more likely to bully others or to be bullied. They believe that this is normal, so they don't see where it's wrong in any way. They think that this is the way that it should be. So because of that, they often will become abusers, or girls tend to become victims. In teen dating violence as well, they're more likely to be involved in abusive relationships. So we have a child advocate at our shelter. That is all she does is work with these children when they come in. I do some children's advocacy here through weekly, we do twice a month here, support groups. We're able to provide tutoring if they need it. We have their school supplies every year around time for school to start back. We'll take in school supplies and school clothes and get those to the children. Because I'm only one person here again, I work very closely with the Sunshine House in these situations because I don't have a trained counselor on staff. So I tend to work very closely with them. In the school system, there's care partners inside the school system, so we try to get these children connected to the resources that they need, and the parents as well. Oftentimes DFACS is involved, and we will work with them, because ultimately at the end of the day, I know DFACS may have a bad reputation, oh, they're going to come take my children, but really what they want to do is they want to establish that these children are safe. So by us working with the mother, the family, and DFACS together, we can come up with parenting plans, we can get them in the counseling that they need, and try to keep these families together. And then I also can help them apply for TANF and food stamps and child support, that type of thing. Why does she stay? That's the question everybody always wants to know. Why doesn't she just leave? There's a number of reasons why women stay. Probably the biggest reason is because of the children. But this is another video, and this is Susan again, in her own words, why she stayed.
As a victim, part of that control is that you get to a point where your abuser totally does something to totally overpower you. And they also make you believe that it's your fault. They brainwash to believe that we are the problem. The thing is that they don't come into the relationship like that. They come into the relationship as this really great person. And so we as victims remember the good times. We remember that those times existed. So if we just fix ourselves, it'll go back to.
The young man in the video was her youngest child. He was 8 at the time of the video I showed you earlier. And by this time, he was 16. And his father is in prison. And I cannot remember the date that he is set to be released, but it's only within like the next 7 or 8 years that he'll be out of prison. So if you know somebody or suspect that you know somebody that is in this situation, what can you do to help? A lot of people are very hesitant to speak up and point out that they see that there's a problem. They feel like it's not their business, that, I'm not going to say anything. That can be very dangerous. If you suspect that someone you care about is in the situation, we do recommend that you let her know that there's a problem. What we don't want you to do is try to convince her to go get help or counseling, because once abuse starts, it almost always gets worse, and it usually doesn't stop at all. Counseling doesn't tend to be very effective in these situations. We don't like to really give them advice or push them. Families are very guilty of this. Families get very frustrated with sisters, daughters, whatever, because I know as a mom, I want my child to be safe, but these victims know their situation better than anybody. They know what they're dealing with, and they know what's going to happen if they push the wrong button. So it's very important that we let them know that we see that there's a problem. We can give them the resources that they need. My brochures are in the back, my cards are as well. Just slip it to her and say, hey, here's somebody that can help when you're ready. But we don't ever want you to try to convince them to do something that they're not ready to do, because it can be very devastating. But do be supportive, listen, believe what they tell you, help them make a plan. We tell people all the time, pack a bag. If you have children, pack a bag for yourself and your children, enough for maybe a night or two, all of your important documents, and put that somewhere safe with a friend or a family member. We don't really advise that you leave it in the car, because the chances that you could find it and then wonder why you're moving out can spark a very big issue. Leave it at a neighbor's house or a family or friend. That way, if you do have to leave quick and in a hurry, it's available and you can get it and go. I saw this just as I switched it. If you do assist someone in getting out of an abusive relationship and you know where she's at, don't tell anybody. I tell my victims, my clients' family all the time, don't tell the brother, don't tell the sister. You keep this strictly confidential, because we don't want these abusers knowing where she is or how they may be able to go find her, because you got to think, she's fleeing from a situation. She doesn't want him coming after her. So we can help. We are trained, all of our staff are trained victim advocates. Like I said earlier, we work together with other agencies, with law enforcement, medical, alcohol, and drug and rehab, because a lot of times drug and alcohol are a big factor in these situations. I have done and am trained to do rape and sexual advocacy. Assistance gathering documents, when I said earlier, take those documents and put them in a safe place. Abusers like to tear that stuff up. They like to burn it, destroy it. And sometimes these victims have never had a driver's license. And if you've been lately to try to get one or renew one in Georgia, it's not that easy to do. So part of our advocacy is that we're able to help them gather those documents for housing, driver's license, ID, whatever the case may be. Legal advocacy is probably the biggest thing that I offer here in Emanuel County. Like I told you in the beginning, I've been to court twice this week already, so I am able to assist with protective orders from start to finish. I'm able to help them get connected with legal services. We have a program in Georgia. Basically, it's Georgia Legal Aid, but it's Georgia Legal Services is the name of it now, and it's at no cost to the client. If they do not qualify for those services, we can help get them with a private attorney. I work very closely with law enforcement. We sometimes need police reports, or we may need police accounts of what they've witnessed when they've gone into the home. So I have a very close working relationship with the court and law enforcement. One thing that I wanted to touch on, and I'm not sure how much time we have, I'm going to try to show a short video. I'm going to go through this real fast, because teen dating violence, I'm the mother of a teenager and an upcoming teenager. She'll be 12 in a couple of months, so this is kind of very important to me. But teen dating violence is so much more common than what you can ever imagine. This is a video that shows some of the inside personal accounts of victims, and there's a couple of news stories of real life situations that have taken place in teen dating violence situations.
Dating abuse does not discriminate. It does not pass me by because I'm 16.
Oh, I'm sorry.
not 30.
Sorry.
It does not see if I'm male or female, straight or gay. It only cares if I'm silent.
That she was in an abusive relationship, that her boyfriend didn't want her on the cheerleading squad, didn't want her wearing a bikini, and that he was driving a wedge between her and her friends. It appears that when she finally decided she wanted out, it was a fatal decision.
August 15th, 2007, at about 6:20 in the evening, Monroeville police are called to this townhouse by panicked neighbors who heard terrifying screams. The first officer on the scene sees a neighbor outside helping a bloodied teenage girl struggling to talk.
I positioned myself so she was crouched up against my legs to support her.
Police discover the bloodied girl is an attractive, popular 16-year-old Gateway High School cheerleader. She'd been stabbed 16 times. And just a few feet from the dying cheerleader, police find her killer, her 18-year-old boyfriend, who'd used the same knife to slit his own throat.
John Malarkey's gonna do life in prison. Demi Kusha, her life's over. I mean, on that day, you know, he took everything she was and everything she was ever going to be. There are no winners in a case like this. There are only degrees of loss.
Dating abuse is rampant among young people. They are involved in relationships just like adults. Those relationships mirror adult relationships in the level and severity of violence, and they are just sometimes as dangerous as adult abusive relationships.
Well, some call it a secretive topic, teen dating violence. There are ways to get help, but for an Olympic high school cheerleader, it's too late.
She was in love.
A star athlete, a cheerleader in and out of uniform.
No matter what happened in her life, she never gave up.
Chardonnay Watts' desire to never give up may have cost her her life.
That was the wrong choice.
Grandmother Shirley Rogers says Watts returned with boyfriend Gary Daniels. Over the weekend, police say Daniels, also 18, shot the Olympic high senior.
She had broke up with him, and she was doing good, you know. But maybe they were just trying to get back together at that time. It might be that he didn't want her to break up with him.
Almost as big as drugs, and you hear about that all the time in schools. You hear about it just at work, but you never hear about, you know, abuse, and it's all over.
What do you think you're doing? I can't believe it.
When you tell an alcoholic they're an alcoholic, they don't listen. They're like, no, I don't have a problem. That's exactly how it is. You're like, no, I'm not in an abusive relationship. Until you step out of it and you actually look at the big picture.
You know, you keep kidding yourself. You're thinking, it's gotta get better, it's gonna get better, you know. Then you realize it's not. And you realize you've been kidding yourself all this time. Well, you're in way too deep. Every 30 seconds, I gotta pick up the phone. And then, of course, if I don't answer it, then I have a voicemail, text message, you know, where are you at, what are you doing? There's never any free time. I mean, you know, anytime we went anywhere, it was always me that was reaching in my wallet to pull out, you know, for the girls, for the clothes, for the movies, for the concert tickets. You know, we both had part-time jobs. You know, why didn't she offer to pay for anything? And then she started to disrespect me in front of my friends, making jokes about me, flirting with other guys, bringing me down in front of other people. You know, I kind of felt bad about myself. I started wondering, you know, what kind of a person am I? what do I want out of life? You know, is this how I want to be treated the rest of my life? The answer is no. You know, I want respect. I want to be able to give someone respect, and I want respect back.
I don't think you should waste any time when you even have a little bit of a feeling that it's going to get abusive. Just either get away and just break up with them. I mean, don't talk to them. And if it gets to the point where they're not leaving you alone, then take it to somebody. Take it to your parents. Take it to the police. Do something. I mean, it's like you don't ever have to be abused by anyone.
Ask a family, ask a friend, you know, ask anyone. The important thing is that you're not dealing with it yourself, that you're trying to talk with someone and work it through. You're not going to deal with it alone. You shouldn't have to.
I just did it cold turkey. I broke it off, didn't answer the calls, changed my number, everything. And I salute anybody who do that.
Get yourself back on your feet, and then when you realize that you're ready for a relationship again, get to know that person and know that he won't make the mistakes or she won't make the mistakes that your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend did.
Think about before you start yelling and throwing things. You can always sit down and think about stuff. I mean, you can talk it out. There's a moment right before you hit someone that you can stop. You can say, wait a minute, this is not right.
Basically, you gotta give respect to get respect. Doing what you're doing to your partner is just gonna make your partner feel bad, and you want to see the partner be happy.
Friendship, life, faith, honesty, respect, love and freedom. Love is forever. Love is acceptance. Love is everything.
So that was a little graphic as well with some of the news reports. 1 in 5 young women will be a victim of sexual assault while they're in college. And 1 in 9 will be raped. 1 in 10 will be hurt on purpose by someone they love. And of course, 1 is too many. So that's why we do what we do. Why don't they speak up? It seems easy to do. Well, a lot of times they don't understand that they are the victim. When you get the, where are you at, what are you doing, the messages, and a lot of times young girls think, oh, he just really loves me. He loves me so much, he cares what I'm wearing, he cares who my friends are. Those are very big warning signs. If you or someone that you know is in a relationship where you're being controlled or feel like you have no room to breathe, no free space, that's a pretty good indication, a red flag. A lot of young people are embarrassed. They don't want to admit to their family and friends that Mr. Perfect isn't quite so perfect. They're afraid of losing their privileges. Mom may take the cell phone away, or now they're not allowed to go out on a date. And so a lot of times they keep that quiet because they're afraid of what their parents are going to do to them. They kind of talked about this in the video, what your options are. Just admit to yourself that your partner is capable of this type of behavior. Gain your independence. Start going out with your friends. Make other friendships outside of that relationship. But one thing that we recommend is if you are trying to get out, the girl said she did it cold turkey. If you're going to break up, we do recommend that you do it in a public place. Make sure you have family or friends around, so that would kind of diffuse any possibility of it becoming violent, because he's probably going to be pretty mad about it. Learn how to get help. Learn who you can talk to. There are people at your schools, counselors, adults, and myself. I can always take a crisis call if you just have questions. How to tell if your friend is being abused. I have a really quick personal story of a young girl that when she was in high school, she kind of came to me crying. She says, Miss Dawn, my friend she's just quit having anything to do with us. We try to talk to her and she walks away, and we don't know what we've done to her. And a couple of years later, they found out that she had been in a very severely abusive relationship with her boyfriend. And so she was real withdrawn. So what you can look for are changes in her behavior. Is she dressing differently, acting differently? Is she withdrawing from her family and friends? Is she avoiding people? Those are pretty good warning signs that there may be something going on. And, you know, speak up. Just let her know that you know that there's a problem, that you recognize that something's not quite right. What we don't want you to do is be judgmental, ditch the drama. Don't tell others about, because if she's going to talk to you about it, she's trusting you. And this is very, very hard for people to admit that they're in these types of situations. So take everything she says to heart and encourage her to seek help. And that's all I have for today. My contact information is on the screen. Again, there are brochures in the back. My business card is back there as well. If anybody would like to volunteer, please give me a call. Thank y'all for having me.
Please fill out the survey.